I think our plan for the night is very apt for this group.
Just for the camera. Oh, I want to hear this. We're talking back here at the end of the thing.
Okay. Okay, well, I have a very strong voice, and I can make a lot of noise. Howard, hi. We're about to start. Anyway, I don't mean to make an example of you or anything. Anyway, we're going to have a little bit different plan tonight because we'd like to have more feedback from you guys and interaction with you on topics that are of interest to you. And so 4 of our staff members are going to give brief previews of what their discussion group will be, and then we'll break into discussion groups for the second half hour or so. So we'll see how it works. We'll see how you like it. I read the Rasmussen reports when I came in today, and they were talking about how many in the population think that lowering taxes is bad for the economy. And there's quite a bit of an agreement among people that lower taxes are better for the economy. So I don't think anybody here is fooled by that. There were other things they objected to, like was government spending good for the economy, which is one of the things I've heard of from some of our legislators. But this is a very educated group, and as I read the Rasmussen poll reports, I thought, nobody in this group is going to have to be educated to these basic facts. But one of the things people aren't as aware of is how bad things are in Wyoming economy quantitatively. And so these 3 charts indicate, we printed them up, it looks like a paint spatter line, but this is how fast local government is growing. These are growth rates. This is how fast state government is growing. And this is how fast our economy is growing. We have had negative GDP the last 2 years in Wyoming. And this shows that while the other states are recovering, the ones in yellow are the states that are not recovering. They're still slow. So among the states, we're among the slowest. Our diversified economy is really in bad shape. And as you all know, our government economy is doing just fine. This shows, and you can come up and look at these later, but this shows the private economy really dipped, while the local hiring kept steady and even went up. And the state hiring actually is a little slower than the local hiring, but that also held. So much to the disadvantage of local economies. For instance, in the last 4 years, the local hiring has grown 24%, while the private economy grew 1%, private hiring grew 1%. There are other kinds of comparisons like that, for instance, growth of compensation, rate of absolute compensation, and so on. So you're aware that we're not going to take it anymore. It's really time to take another trajectory. We had a meeting with legislators to that effect, and that Amy organized, and so we're trying to get some really different kind of movement in Wyoming to save our economy. So with no further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, who is... They're all passing the buck. Regina Mina. Here you go, Regina.
Thank you. Welcome. It's good to see all of you again. This session we had a couple of wins for liberty, and then we had 2 that were kind of neutral, and that's okay. So I'd like to run you through we had an early win before session when we visited with Governor Meade and asked that he not support a state-based exchange. In fact, we asked that he let the federal government go ahead and use their funds to build the exchange and to make sure that it works for Wyoming. So they did that, and the legislature also went along with that. So we received an early win there. That means Wyoming citizens aren't going to be wasting their money on something we all know is tentative at best. Not only because they roll out the rules and regulations, they're continuing to do that, which defines how it operates. But when you look at what is happening as they roll out these rules and regulations, people begin to see we're not going to have affordable insurance. We can't. With all of the regulations we put on insurers, with all of the government funds put into these, it isn't going to work. I encourage any of you who are interested in this to get on Senator John Barrasso's website. He delivered a wonderful speech just today, I believe, on what we can expect to begin with when we see the spike in insurance premiums. Those folks will hit sometime this summer as the rules and regs are finalized, and insurers and employers are having to get the information because they're supposed to be letting us all know about fall when this hits. Look for them to hit this summer, and people are going to start looking at their insurance and saying, do we need this? Can we absorb $200 a month increase? That's a car payment. Forget about upgrading your house, whatever you're doing. We're no longer going to be able to say, well, let's go ahead and just pick it up just in case. It's now a very high cost item that consumers are going to have to absorb in their very meager incomes that are not growing. So, something to look forward this summer. So, let's go to the wins. Senate File 122, expansion of Medicaid. That died in the Senate. There was a little tug-of-war between the House and the Senate when they each pulled up different amendments attached to different bills to want to expand it. But it held, and that it was a very wise thing to do. And I want to tell you a little bit more about this very quickly. Medicaid expansion, as you all know, regards increasing the eligibility level for those that are on Medicaid. It does not mean adding on optional services. It does not mean other things. It means expanding. This Medicaid expansion has been available to states for some time. It's the fact that the states were not choosing to expand Medicaid that the Federal Health Care Act threw it in and tried to make states do. They wanted to force the expansion because states weren't doing that. And, of course, the Supreme Court said, no, you may not do that. Well, Maine expanded. Maine's pretty comparable to us. Maine expanded their Medicaid program to cover people at up to 200% of the federal poverty level. Wyoming's pretty much remains at 100. We scooch up to 133% for some groups. They did that a decade ago. Here are the results, as reported by their Health Department Commissioner, Mary Mayhew. And she spoke about this to a group of Florida legislators. Now, if you're in the know, you realize that Florida is in the tug-of-war. Their governor being embattled, kind of looking at a way to kind of keep his seat, and the legislators say, no, we're not going to go along with this Medicaid expansion. According to Maine, from what they've seen, expansion did not achieve cost reductions. We all know that these services don't. Did not decrease the number of ER visits because it did not significantly reduce the number of uninsured. All of these things that people are saying we need to expand for are not realized. These are just the facts. And it did not reduce the amount of uncompensated care provided by hospitals. That continues to escalate today. Costs continue to escalate. Everything continues to escalate. The legislature and Governor Meade were absolutely correct to not expand Medicaid. They gave us some time to work this thing out, find out how this Federal Health Care Act is actually going to be implemented. So, if you can, you run into one, your legislators run into the governor, say, hey, thanks for holding the line. Oh, another thing that they did find in Maine was that being, of course, Medicaid reimbursement payments, not only are they low, but they delay payment. And it caused a $484 million delay in Medicaid reimbursements to their hospitals, 39 hospitals. So then you can understand why, if these hospitals are all supposed to take more Medicaid patients, it creates a cash flow. Who's going to pay for that? Who's got the money to step in and augment the delayed cash? Well, they're going to try to go after, of course, the working class. And we're running out of money. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that we were absolutely correct in not doing that. Then there was an article in Sunday's newspaper that divulged two truths. I really like the article. It said we should have expanded Medicaid, but that's not right. Two truths. It revealed the fact that the supporters of the Federal Health Care Act were industries who would receive more financial subsidies at taxpayer expense. Number one, hospital associations, medical associations, citizen associations, yes, AARP, I'm looking squarely at you, and insurance companies, of course. Well, when the Supreme Court ruling said no, you may not require people to purchase insurance, they shall have a choice, that put everybody, that was a game changer. So that was one truth about who supported it and why. They thought they were going to get more people in the market and better pay. And then it also supports this one thing because Dr. Lucas said it's our job to make health care affordable. Finally, some honest debate. And this game changer is going to support the fact that government subsidies, when they subsidize these private industries, it demonstrates that government funding and insurance are cost drivers in healthcare. It's not the other way around. Now, I've been following with our legislators and will continue to over the summer as they tackle this kind of philosophical debate because people are saying, oh, no, the healthcare costs are high because insurance is making that. No, the insurance costs are high because healthcare costs make them. So, as we start pulling apart the real cost drivers and seeing who's driving what, we'll get closer to finding out what is going to lower healthcare. But the good positive thing was that finally, because we didn't expand government subsidies, these hospitals are now having to say, well, we don't have a count on money anymore. We're going to have to live within our means and start lowering costs. So proof positive right there that we're on the right course. Okay, so that was a good one. The next bill, I'm going to kind of give it a neutral because it's going to take some time to see what happened here. That's the sales of insurance. Actually, at the very beginning, it didn't have in there the components that we needed. And I'm going to thank, and I hope I've got this right, Representative Sue Wilson, who during committee got the most important part of House Bill 125 language put into 82. So the entire language was in there. And even though they've added on 5 other regulations to insurers, which is going to make it very difficult for them to offer lower premiums to us, at least we're moving in the right direction. We have the insurance bill there. So that was I'm going to give it a neutral, but we're moving in the right direction there. And then looking at studying the exchanges, again, the legislature just wants to keep their fingers in, which is wise because, of course, as we all talked about last year, the executive branch really, under the law, would have the authority to go ahead and work with the federal government to establish the exchange. So the legislature is keeping their authority in check at all times. So all in all, I'm going to say we won some liberty this session for health care, and our legislators and governor are moving in the right direction with the 5-step plan. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Regina. For those who don't know me, I'm Steve Klein, work as a staff attorney here at Y Liberty and a quasi-lobbyist, Liberty guy, whatever. So this year we were working on some land rights issues. A couple bills came up in legislature, and the most important one, the one that I worked on with Representative Kendall Croker and ended up having quite a few sponsors, was House Bill 182. This is a project that goes way back at Y Liberty. Ben Barr is in the audience today. It's a paper he wrote about over a year and a half ago now on the RS 2477, revised statute 2477, part of the Mining Act of 1866. Yeah, a lot of these land laws go back a very, very long way. And what happened during westward expansion was the federal government said, well, we have all this federal land out there. Whatever you want to do, you want to cross this land, go for it. And we'll respect those rights of way. They didn't foreclose those rights of way over federal land until 1976. And everything's still great in our western counties. Here in Laramie County, we don't have much federal land to speak of, but you get out to Hot Springs, Fremont, all those counties, there's still tons of not just federal land, but a lot of rights-of-way going over them. 2 tracks, trails, maintained roads, improved roads, some paved roads. They're being used by mining companies. They're being used for access by hunters for recreation and all sorts of things. They're just there, and they're just being used. It's really no problem right now, but about a decade ago in Utah, BLM started closing certain roads. And since introducing this bill, I have heard that we've had some problems actually up in Campbell County around in Thunder Basin, that a lot of roads, access roads, have in fact been closed and are forcing business, coal and stuff to go, 20 miles out of their way from point A to point B when they could have done the 5-mile road. So this bill went very far, came out of the House 59-0. I was very happy to see that. I think people are very excited about it. I think it was really really well written as far as providing a process on a county-by-county basis to allow counties to register these, document these roads, show that they exist, and set us up for in case the feds try and close them. That's the beauty of it, is this wasn't really a novel thing. This is just following in Utah's steps, because they've already taken this through the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is Wyoming is a part of, and Ben and I will be there in 2 months on our free speech case we learned yesterday, but I digress. This is already a proof positive step for liberty that goes in the right direction as far as asserting local control over federal land. So it's a very strong bill. I was very happy with it, and we got all the way out of Senate committee, and then it just kind of ended up in that list of things that could not be heard on the Senate floor. So as far as persistence goes, this was a brand new bill. Sometimes, especially on the Senate side, it takes a few years before bills get their day in the sun. We saw that, as Regina mentioned, with interstate sales. We worked very diligently on that last year with former Speaker Ed Buchanan, as well as a lot of different legislators, and that was died also on the Senate side last year, but this year it became law. So, and as Regina said, it was a step in the right direction. So I think 182 will be coming back next year. I'm probably going to have a different number, I'm willing to bet, but it's very a good step in the right direction. There's been a lot of talk about land rights, and I always have to kind of emphasize that this is not the full-time thing that I do here, and if we ever really want to have land rights here at Y Liberty, it's going to take a full-time position. That may happen someday. I don't know, but we talk about unified development codes. We've had meetings here before, and it is a very complex issue. This is one narrow area where we can take a step in the right direction, but that by no means makes me an expert. And this year I did get to scratch the surface on water law, and that taught me one thing: Steve, stay out of water law. So that's a very quick summary. I'm going to be having our breakout session. Can talk about various things that happened, be the gun bills, be it this land bill in particular, any other ones you may have questions on. I followed, I think, most of them, but by no means all of them. We had some eminent domain amendments and things like that this session as well. So that is it, and thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for your attention, and do keep up the resilience. Don't want to dig too much into it, but if I had to call this session anything in my 3 years in Wyoming, I describe it as Thunderdome, the third installment of the Mad Max trilogy. Been a lot of bad blood, a lot of, just among constituents, between legislators. I mean, the drama is just kind of palpable, and I think I'm certainly still in recovery mode myself. I can only imagine what the legislators are going through. So on that front. So, all right, and with that, who's next? Who's next? All right. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. It's Maureen Bader. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bills that I followed this session. We had some wins for liberty. We had some losses for liberty. But I'm going to start with the bad news. Your legislature worked pretty hard to grease the government spending wheels this session. The first bill that I followed, which was, we really thought we had a really good chance of killing, was HB 69, the fuel tax hike bill, which was cleverly marketed as the highway funding bill. This was sold to legislators as a source of long-term funding for roads, but as I wrote in the gas tax Mythbuster that you can pick up in the back room there near the cookies, it's not a long-term source of funding for roads. And in fact, it wasn't even going to cover off funding for this year. WYDOT said they needed, the Wyoming Department of Transportation, or WYDOT, said they needed $135 million. All they were going to get out of this gas tax, if behavior stays exactly the same, is just a little bit over $40 million. So that just goes to show that we had this cavil of special interest groups. They had what was quite an admirable campaign. They managed to sell this, and that just goes to show, it really doesn't matter almost what you say. If you can market cleverly, you can get your way at the legislature, which is kind of a bad thing for us. So if you want to think about liberty as keeping your own money in your pockets to spend on stuff that you want, the HB 69 or the gas tax bill was a bad bill. But it wasn't all bad. We actually had a really surprising win for liberty with the Game and Fish Department. Now, I really could not believe the tenaciousness of these bureaucrats to really make people pay more for their hunting and fishing licenses. It was unbelievable. They tried 4 times to increase hunting and fishing license fees, and they failed. The first bill was SF 32. It just sort of disappeared, morphed into HB 136, where they wanted to increase fees on both residents and non-residents. And this was shot down by the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee. So it died in committee. Undeterred, the bureaucrats came back. They said, okay, we'll just hike fees on non-residents. That'll be a lot more palatable. People who will vote for you, people won't not vote for you because you hike their hunting and licensing fees. This, admirably and principally, also died in the Travel Committee. Undeterred, we have the bureaucrats going back again. Where did they go this time? Well, they thought, we're not having very good luck with this particular committee. Let's go to another committee. Which committee did they go to? They went to the Revenue Committee. Which bill came out of the Revenue Committee? The gas tax hike bill. What comes out of the Revenue Committee, which we really should call the Taxation Committee? The bill to hike hunting and licensing fees. So they had much better luck with what should be called the Taxation Committee. But fortunately, principles remained, and that bill was killed in the first reading in the House. So that was actually quite a good win for Liberty, because if those bureaucrats were as tenacious about finding waste in their department, they wouldn't be looking for these kinds of fee hikes. And I think what this really shows is that greater transparency is really the way to find savings in these departments. Because I don't know for those of you who were at our meeting last time when I was speaking, I talked about bogus budget cuts. And one of the things that we talked about was the fact that there are a couple of departments and agencies in the government who have what they call off-budget, or budgets that aren't under the scope of the legislature. We managed, through the intervention of one very savvy legislator, to get the hidden game and fish budget. And what we did was put our journalist intern, who has now moved on to other opportunities, but he was great when he was here. He found, what do you know, waste at the game and fish department. Their salaries had gone up. Their salaries had gone up about 3 times faster than the average salary. It cost them twice to raise pheasants. It cost them twice as much to raise farm fish as equivalent companies in the private sector. And even more outrageous, they were spending $300,000 a year for 2 years filming, what do you call these things? The reality TV programs. And guess who was featured in one of the episodes? Well, the governor's children were featured being taught how to fish at taxpayer expense. Gotta like it. But what we did get out of here, which was really good, was something called HB 79, the budget review process. So what that's going to do is bring the Game and Fish Department and the Wyoming Department of Transportation's budgets back under the scope of the legislature. So I think that was a really good win, because what we saw when we took a close look at the Game and Fish Department budget is, yes, there's plenty of room for savings. You guys have got to start not only living within your budget, but starting to spend less. And the other bill that I followed that we can talk about later if anybody wants to discuss this was the lottery bill. Now, whether you agree with gambling or not, the issue here was with this bill, because it's going to create, it passed, it's going to create another bureaucracy, and the problem with this bureaucracy is that a lot of its activities will be secret. It was supposed to be under the Wyoming Public Records Act, so it was supposed to be, would have been able to access this information under a Freedom of Information request, but they've decided that, the trade secrets are going to be secret, and systems and procedures are going to be secret, and the meetings where we decide this are going to be secret, and all this is confidential. So we're not going to be able to find out what's going on with this. And we can talk about that one a little bit more. So also back in the room near the cookies, you can find another article that I published in the Casper Star Tribune, if you haven't seen it already, on the gas tax and why it was a bad idea. And another article that goes through all of these transparency problems with the with the Lottery Corporation. So with that, I will pass it on to Amy.
5 minutes. Good evening, everybody. I'll be very, very brief so we can get into our breakout sessions. This budget cycle, I was basically tasked with watching over the supplemental budget process. Even though this was a general session, of course, the legislature always has a supplemental budget bill. So I have those numbers. Essentially, the bad news is, obviously, you all understand this, the budget grew. By 3.38%, we went from $3.2 billion to $3.3 billion in general fund spending through the supplemental budget process. That includes, I'm including the $61 million in budget cuts on the executive side and the $662,000 on the judiciary side. So those numbers roll in the actual budget cuts. Overall, the executive branch asked for $140 million in spending, and they did receive that. The judiciary branch asked for $60,000 more dollars, and they did receive that. The Wyoming legislature spent about $6 million in total on various bills, from municipal solid waste facilities to money to implement a study on the health exchanges. They're not implementing, they're just studying, and money to relocate bighorn sheep, to name just a couple of them. So overall, we saw increases across the board in state spending in the supplemental budget process. Back by the cookies, I've also put 2 articles that I wrote, one about the general state of the supplemental budget and also about revenue flows. So in this budget bill, the legislature also created the SIPA account, the Strategic Investment in Projects account, and this account was set up after the governor essentially asked for, under the Wyoming Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, the state receives capital gains, both irregular and regular capital gains. Those gains are not profiled in the legislature, and about every 5 years we do what's called, we shift the portfolio. That happened this last December, and when that happened, the state realized, I think, about $80 million in irregular gains. Those dollars will now flow into this new account that was created for the governor to essentially spend on strategic investment and projects, essentially. So just as a teaser, and I don't want to use up all the time, so in the breakout session, I'm happy to talk to you about revenues, revenue flows off the PMTF, what happened in the supplemental budget cycle, how much money we spent, all that good stuff. So, thank you.
You can see we're really moving on this. Between Sven's macro and Amy's looking at the budget, and Maureen, figuring out what the game is, we're hoping that this brings a lot of sunshine to the goings-on and sets the framework for moving in a more a wiser direction that saves our private enterprise system. So let's see, where are you guys going to take people?
We're going to go to the main conference room.
Okay, so if you wanted to speak with Maureen, follow her to the main conference room, and Regina's going to be here. Mm-hmm. Where are you going to be?
Here, I guess.
Here as well?
I'm going to go across the hall.
And he'll be across the hall. So feel free to circulate and go to your discussion group.